it's a pleasure to be here in Australia, I must say. And the topic today is building fiber, sustainable fiber nations. And I think the time is just perfect because Australia is just about to build a sustainable fiber nation. So I would like to talk about basically three aspects of sustainability. But the first question will be about who is actually deploying fiber today? Which are the fiber nations? So just an outline of the fiber market. And then I go to the three aspects. And one of them is why. Why do we deploy fiber at all? Which are the socio-economic benefits? And why should we spend some public money on this? The second question is about eco-sustainability, or what we call eco-efficiency. Because it's not a matter only about being green or eco-friendly, it's also about operational efficiency. They happen to go hand in hand. And this is quite important for fiber, that we can actually, both from a financial point of view and from an eco-friendly point of view, we can attack the same problem, mainly power consumption. This is the second topic. And thirdly, I want to talk about technical sustainability, because we know that what we deploy today, which will be in the ground for many, many years to come, and it's important that we understand for the next generation access, it will also be applicable. And therefore we have to look at a glimpse into what is the next generation access and how can we make sure there are no stranded investments. But okay, let's start with the FTTX market. If you look to the FTTX market and only consider one metric, only one, and that's number of homes passed. And why do we look only to homes passed? Well, homes passed, in contrast to, for example, subscribers, tells you something about the level of investment. And what we're trying to see here is which nations are investing in fiber deep technologies. Here we consider fiber nations are nations which invest in any type of fiber deep technology. It can be fiber to the node, fiber to the building, fiber to the home. And if you study this and you plot it in two dimensions, on the x-axis you look to the growth in 2007, 2008. And on the y-axis you consider the penetration. Then you'll see that you'll find three different segments. The first segments are on the top left, is the mature nations. These are nations which have a very, very high penetration of FTTX today. The growth is somewhat slower. For natural reasons, they're actually reaching maturity. And here you find the usual suspects. You find the pioneers. You find South Korea, you find Japan, you find Hong Kong, of course. I'm also proud to say that you also find two countries in Europe. One is Belgium, where I happen to live, and Switzerland as well. They have very, very high penetrations. As you can see from the coloring of the bubble, you see that many of the fiber nations, the mature fiber nations here in Asia Pacific, they have a kind of mixed strategy with FTTH and FTTB together. Whereas in Europe, this is mainly FTTM. These nations are asking themselves, what's next? This is typically questions we get from them. Which is the next generation access? They're already looking on what is the next phase. Then, if you look to the bottom right, you'll find another type of nations. These are the nations we made the significant step forward in 2007, 2008. We call them leapfroggers. Because they have started to move quickly to FTTX by different means. Here you'll find a lot of the Eastern European countries and the Central European countries, where there is some public investment going on. You also notify that there's an enormous bubble here called China. And the size of the bubble tells you something about the total addressable market, namely the number of households. So of course it's very interesting that China is moving. For us as a vendor, of course, it's very important because the numbers are enormous. Question, can you address China? Is that can you address the total addressable market? Probably not, because China is so enormous, it will take an enormous amount of time. But nevertheless, as soon as China starts to move, it translates into large numbers. And then the third dimension, the moving nations. These are nations which has a fiber strategy in place and they're executing, double-digit growth, steadily moving upwards. And here you find a lot of the Western European countries. Here you find the US. A new one is actually Russia. Russia is now coming quite quickly, and I would say that they're tapping into leapfrogging nations now. Russia is a very dynamic market, mainly FTTB. So Australia is not yet here, but I expect Australia to very soon be on this map. Interesting to notice also is that 14% of the broadband subscribers today are on some kind of fiber deep technology. So fiber FTTX is not something for the labs. FTTX is being deployed, is tested, is field proven. So it's not a research project anymore. This is a reality. Let's look upon which technologies do they deploy and how do they deploy. Well, basically you'll find two trends. For fiber to the home, it's mainly the PON technology, being GPON or EPON. And GPON is the technology moving the fastest of the fiber technologies. And the second one is VDSL2, of course. There is some point-to-point fiber, specifically for smaller utility and municipality city nets in Europe. But apart from that, it's dominated by the PON and the VDSL2 technologies. And of course, from an Alcatel-Lucent perspective, and I have to say this as a marketing director, this is very good news for us. Since we are the market leader in VDSL2, we have more than 50% of the market for VDSL2, and on GPON we are about 40% today. So, of course, we are very well prepared to address this market, so that this is good news for us. So that was my quick summary of the FTTX market. Now let's look into the why, the socioeconomic benefits and the need for speed, and I'll try to tackle both questions at the same time. Socioeconomics. Well, we know that broadband and wealth goes together. There is a quite clear correlation between the gross national income and the broadband penetration. You may ask yourself, is the broadband a result of the wealth, or is the wealth a result of broadband? Well, it's probably a combination of the two. Wealth generates broadband, which generates wealth. But there is a strong correlation. And in the US, there has been a report which says that if you can increase the broadband penetration by 1%, you can increase the level of employment by 0.2 to 0.3%, which is, of course, very interesting in this difficult financial times. So broadband and employment go somehow together. This was very interesting, we thought. I'm also the chairman of the Market Intelligence Committee for the FTTH Council in Europe, and we were very stimulated by this, and we said, we need to understand this better. We need to understand which are the socioeconomic benefits of fiber more in depth. And we decided to do a study together with Ove, where we analyzed one particular country. It's a strange country in the Nordics called Sweden. Lots of blonde, tall guys with a passion for fiber. Stay away from them. I happen to be Swedish. And the approach was the following. Let's do like they do in medicine. Let's take one group which gets the medicine, FTTH, and then take one control group which didn't. Let's find two places in Sweden which have, apart from that, the same background, same demographics, basically the same order. And there are such places because there are a lot of small city nets in Sweden which got FTTH and there are some who didn't. And this is the statistical sample. 167 people, roughly half of them on FTTH, the other one on some other type of technology. And let's now compare the two. But what is the differences? Where do we find differences? Well, one clear difference, there were a lot of things we couldn't prove, I have to say. But what we could see clearly were basically two things. The first one was that FTTH users spend a lot more time online. If you look to the group optical fiber, and if you look to the red bar, you see that, the purple bar, you'll find out that it's much higher than any of the others. These are the ones who spend more than 3 hours per day online. So it's clearly a link between FTTH and spending lots of time online. You also notice that there's a group of people who says not sure. These are the people who really don't know which technology they have in home. And I mean, I'm a kind of technology nerd, so of course I know what I have. My mother doesn't. So I can fully understand why some people actually don't know. But the interesting point here again was that optical fiber, FTTH, generates a lot more time spent. But even better,